What's up, peers, and welcome to Open Source Everything here on the World Crypto Network, where we have a really kind of awkward conversation because actually we shouldn't talk about this. Actually, our mouths should be shut and nothing should pass our lips. But today we're going to break the first rule of Mimblewimble. We talk kind of about Mimblewimble. It's good that I'm not alone because today I'm joined again by the Crypto Rafe. What's up?
Hi guys, I'm all good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. What have you been up to recently?
Well, just trying to learn as much about the Mimblewimble tech and trying to get my own company started and going. That's pretty much about it.
Very nice. Entrepreneurship is always good. Education is also very important. So that is two important goals. Keep it up. And we're joined by a Mimblewimble enthusiast and someone who knows a couple things or two about this amazing technology. Sal, how are you doing, my friend?
Great, thanks. How are you guys?
We're all fantastic here. Perfect. Now, this is going to be a nice overall introduction and maybe asking some in-depth or interesting questions. Yeah, maybe let's get this going. Sal, from you personally first, because that's the first time you're on the WCN. Kind of what is your story? First, like getting into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general, but then specifically how you found Mimblewimble.
Well, obviously I heard about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies when they first launched, but I didn't take it seriously. Around maybe 2016-ish, early 2017, I started to read a bit more about it. And this was probably caused by me seeing articles about, the price rises and stuff. But I still didn't jump down the rabbit hole. I didn't actually purchase any or get involved with wallets. But I sort of took the dip in the 2017 summer bear market. So leading up to the sort of Bitcoin Cash fork, I think it was, and Ethereum sort of hitting a low of like 80, was it $120? I can't remember at the time. That's when I first took the dip. And yeah, throughout sort of end of 2017, early 2018, I was just ICOs and investing and making money, and I think everyone else was caught up with the euphoria and making money and thinking they're amazing investors. So I was kind of doing that. And around that time, actually, so a bit more than a year ago, a friend of mine invited me to a small Telegram group he'd made for Grin. There was only less than 50 people in there at the time. And we just sort of made it a focal point to gather some information and talk about it. And yeah, since then it's just grown and grown and grown, and now it's maybe the largest Telegram group on Grin, I think. And yeah, we just sort of tried to make it into a resource hub to bring together documentation and information about Grin and obviously Mimblewimble as well. So that's my background and how I got involved.
Okay, very interesting. Rafe, how did you first find out about Mimblewimble?
I'm not really even sure. I think it was Andreas or Ivan on Tech or someone that has made a video about the topic. I know that it was really old and it had a lot of information that isn't valid anymore, but that was something that got me interested. And after that, I just kept reading about it. I mean, like, I'm a Bitcoin person, but I'm really, really interested about the technology side of Grin and what it can actually, enable or what can it do. I think it's a fascinating thing, that the tech side and how it, gathers information on a blockchain about 10 times less than, for example, Monero is a big thing.
There are definitely some technological things here in Mimblewimble specifically that are really interesting. So this is not just some copy and paste of Bitcoin. This is actually quite some interesting and compelling improvements, maybe, or maybe Bitcoin is still better. But well, we don't know, right? So let's. This is actually worth studying and looking into. And maybe here first, how everything started was right here on July 19th, 2016. This text file was dead dropped on a darknet mailing list. So everything encrypted, and we have no clue who or which identity, which individual has published this paper. But they did so under the name Tom Elvis Redusor, which is, I think, French for Lord Voldemort. So this is a Harry Potter labeled theme, which is quite nice. And here we see on a couple, a couple lines, not too much actually, with 7 reference here. So it is quite a simple white paper, and I highly encourage you all to read it, as it is actually quite intuitive. And it explains why this is such an interesting technology. Well, this Tom Elvis Redusor, he dropped off the face of the planet immediately after, and we've never heard from him since. But a couple dedicated individuals have picked up these thoughts in this white paper and actually wrote an implementation. I think that was first and foremost Andrew Polstra, who was one of the big developers that picked this up right when he read this here on the mailing list. So this white paper, this Mimblewimble technology in itself is similar to Bitcoin in that sense, that it at least had the anonymous badass mic drop, and then dedicated individuals picking up the ball from there and continuing it going. So this is not a ICO, at least in and of itself. Mimblewimble is actually a technology. And there are different implementations of this technology right here. And I would argue, like right from the bat, that Grin is one of these implementations that is one of the most promising and most interesting. And you can go to the GitHub link in the description and see here the source code for Grin. So everything, of course, is open source, as it has to be, right? But yeah, Sal, what do you think of this introduction of Grin and this Mimblewimble and this white paper approach that Tom Helvis Redusor took?
I think this sort of whole Bitcoin-esque beginning is what drew a lot of people to the project, especially when I mean, Grin was launched as an implementation of Mimblewimble in I think late 2016, and then as 2017 went by, and you had all of these random ICOs and money grabs, and the whole space became commercialized. I think that probably there was zero or very, very few projects which were not sort of money corporate based. And Grin was and Mimblewimble obviously was one of those, and that's what drew a lot of people to it, especially initially, because the devs that were working on it, they're just developers. There's been no marketing. Been no sort of announcements or shilling campaigns. So I think that actually really helped it out early on to gain a bit of traction in the community. And since its mainnet release and leading up to that, it's just blown up a lot. And I think as more and more people have heard of it, the excitement has grown. And a lot of that excitement is really just based on that it's not a money grab and that there's no hidden agenda. I think a lot of people that are probably following Grin might not even understand how much of an improvement the technology is on current privacy chains. But yeah, so this sort of money-free project launch is what is drawing a lot of people to it, maybe even more so than the actual tech behind it. So yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, like, I just think it's a cool way to, get the idea started or the project started, that you don't have a company or any kind of funding already to it. I mean, like, you leave it to people, and if they like it, they will do it. And, there's nothing else behind it. And yeah, I mean, there's these two different implementations in Mimblewimble protocol. It's one of these this Green, and other one is Beam, and they have some already some fundamental differences between the two, which we could probably go into also a little bit. I mean, for example, the issuation of or emission of currency is kind of a little bit different than we are probably used to. Sal, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, so Beam and Grin obviously are they're the two current Mimblewimble sort of implementations. Beam, I think Beam was officially launched as a project in the beginning of 2018, but I'm not sure on the exact date. Beam is much more. It's not an ICO, but it's ICO-like in the sense that there is a founder's reward. So the devs and the company behind the project will be making money off it. And in terms of the actual technology, although both sort of projects are based on Mimblewimble, there are some technical differences between Beam and Grin. So they're sort of doing their own thing, and they're obviously doing it with a profit incentive. And I think one of obviously the major differences is that Beam is essentially like Bitcoin in that there is limited supply, and that's 21 million coins. Grin we spoke about before, and in terms of its emission and um, how much of it there is, it's unlimited. So there will be 60 Grin released per minute forever. And just that immediately tells you that it's not about making money for people. It's more about getting people to use it. And this is the philosophy behind that emission schedule, is that early adopters and people who get into the game before everyone else don't make huge amounts of money compared to latecomers, because that can essentially, disincentivize latecomers from using it. So with Bitcoin, for example, a lot of the general public, people that aren't actually in the community, call Bitcoin a Ponzi. And one of the biggest reasons is that, if you got in 10 years ago or 9 years ago, you'd be a multimillionaire by now, even if you'd only invested like $100 or $1,000. And Grin's emission schedule sort of pushes against that. And the reasoning behind it is that, everyone gets a fair chance to get involved and use it. So it's more about getting people to use digital cash rather than storing it, hodling it, and making money off it.
Yeah, and I think
Rafa, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's just one of the really interesting parts. I mean, at first, when I read about this Grin's emission type, that there is no limit on how many coins are there gonna be, I thought it was like a bad thing. But now that I have been thinking about it, it's not really that much different than Bitcoin. It just changes the incentive system a little bit. I mean, like that you don't have such a big hurry to get into the crypto, or that's you don't have such a hurry to go on and buy it. For me, example, I have no interest on buying Grin or Beam for at least a little while, because yeah, I mean, I think in Grin there's going to be, I will have the same kind of a situation even if I would buy it right now or after 2 years. It's meant to be used, not maybe as much as for hodling. And the emission system is like totally depending on how many people are actually wanting to use the currency. I mean, if there's really much more demand than the emission is giving out, it would kind of play out in the same way that Bitcoin.
Well, yes, yes and no. I mean, there are a couple differences here. First and foremost, really important thing though is that the issuance schedule here is voluntarily agreed upon, right? So it's not theft here because everyone is voluntary, everything is voluntary, and further that it's known in advance, right? I would say this is the really tricky part. These are consensus rules, and as long as you do not change the consensus rules, these monetary rules apply. And so that the unchangeability is huge. And Bitcoin has proven this unchangeability of monetary consensus rules for 10 years, right? Grin has not yet proven this track record. It's not saying that it will change it, but I'm just saying it doesn't have that track record yet, right? However, then if there's a difference between having a halvening and having just the same nominal amount of currency issued, is, in my opinion, also not that important. Well, what is truly important is the stock-to-flow ratio, the inflation rate or the issuance rate. And in Bitcoin, this used to be extremely high, right? We had a really high inflation. And because this is halvening, it is exponentially decreasing, okay? Or the stock to flow ratio is exponentially increasing, and every 4 years we further increase this exponential growth. And for Grin, however, the new value of currency, the nominal amount, is always the same. So the flow is always the same, but the stock of money already in existence, that is ever growing. Okay. But because the stock of flow ratio is simply the existing stock divided by the flow of new currency entering this marketplace, the stock to flow ratio actually does grow as well. It does become ever bigger and larger and larger. And as larger the stock to flow ratio is, or vice versa, as lower or the lower the inflation rate gets, or issuance rate gets, the stable and more hard the currency is on a Austrian economics point of view. So I would say that it doesn't really matter if you have a halvening or not. As long as the stock to flow ratio becomes stable, that's perfect. And we want to have a high of a stock to flow ratio as possible. So although I would say Bitcoin is here marginally better, it doesn't really matter too much in the end goal.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I thought too, that I don't actually have that much of a hurry to go on and invest in green because of the emission is going to be pretty high, or the inflation percent is going to be pretty high in the start. What do you think, Sal?
Yeah, and just to throw some numbers in there. So, for example, after 5 years, Grin's quote unquote inflation. It's not inflation, but as a percentage of total currency mined, would be 20% per year. After 10 years, it's 10%. So really, just like you're saying, initially it's a terrible investment. Like anyone who comes onto our group and is like, "Oh, should I buy? When should I buy?" I'm like, "Look, you should probably just take some time and research it properly before even answering these questions. It's not something you should buy to make money now. Like just avoid it for now, because the daily or even weekly inflation is going to be massive. But by 5 years time and maybe 10 years time, and obviously the more time that passes, the less grin is being emitted relative to the total amount, and it has some store value properties. So it's not obviously 100%, but it starts to become a decent store of value and a more reasonable medium of exchange by having that aspect to it. So yeah, it's not that different to Bitcoin in that sense, in that like it doesn't make a huge difference over long time periods. It's just sort of the initial beginning of the currency that is very, very volatile and has a very high emission rate compared to total amount in circulation.
Yes, yes. Yeah, really interesting. And ultimately, the number of currency, the nominal amount, doesn't really matter at all. It just matters that it is that the stock to flow ratio is stable, that the inflation rate is low, and that it is predictable. Right, that you can do economic calculations as an entrepreneur using this money in what you want to invest, or if in what you want to consume. Right, this is how you manage your time preference. So it has to be really stable. And Bitcoin has proven the stability, and that's why something like No2x was so important, or UASF. Right, is that we have the stability in consensus, and that is what is important for money. Much more, or I would argue probably more than any other aspect, is to have this certainty, because money is a tool to remove uneasiness. And we have Audio Video Tweaker here in the chat saying that he probably won't buy Grin as an investment for the next couple years until it has proven itself. So this is, of course, what might happen. And that's why these early Bitcoin adopters were so reckless, right? And they actually deserve all their financial gains in the meantime, because they have taken on such a huge risk. And same would apply to these early Grin adopters that do buy and hold this currency for the long term, and make sure that this currency grows. So really depends. But Sal, what do you think? Maybe you being more involved in the community, what is the main reason why people hold, or why people are interested in Grin? Is it more the financial speculation?
I think it just depends on the level of sort of technical understanding of the person. So I think a lot of people that have just jumped onto the hype are already after making money, of course, and they think that because Grin has made a lot of headlines recently, it's probably a good investment. And then in their head, they sort of combine that with the fact that the devs don't have a money incentive. It's completely fair distribution. But that's obviously not the right way of thinking about it. So maybe initially, I think quite a few of sort of non-technical people that haven't researched it properly are just in it for speculative reasons. I think anyone that does read into it more understands that firstly the key function is the privacy, that it does improve upon current privacy tech and the sort of transaction cut through on the blockchain as well. It's more usable as a privacy coin and has a higher potential of gaining adoption than much more clunky blockchains. And I think on the medium term, it's a solid investment. So maybe after 5 years, or once sort of emission has reduced as a percentage of total supply, and the technology has proven itself and it may have gained some adoption, then it starts to really look as a solid investment. That's my personal perspective. But yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the community, obviously, but this is my sort of observation that a lot of people are just coming in because they've heard about it and the hype. But people that are more aware of the details sort of see it as a medium term thing and not something to get excited about straight away.
Yeah,
So
I think yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, I don't know what you guys think about
that. Yeah, I was just going to say that in my opinion, I think the privacy aspect is one of the biggest that people are interested in. I mean, like privacy has been a pretty difficult thing to do, and it's kind of like heavy on blockchain to do ring confidential transactions and whatever. And the thing in Mimblewimble is that they actually reduces the amount of data that has to be locked in the blockchain about to 1/10 of Monero. Monero has about approximately 2.8 kilobytes of data per transaction, where Mimblewimble has only 0.22 kilobytes. So I just think that is one of the things that many of the full node people would like it to be much lighter.
Yes, exactly. So maybe we should get into some of the technical aspects, right, of what this technology actually can do. And the main, I would say that the main fundamental innovation here was scriptless scripts. So Sal, maybe could you go a bit into the details of how this works?
Like I said, I'm not a techie, so I'd prefer not to embarrass myself. Yeah, so I don't think I can talk about it, to be honest. I don't know enough in detail, so I apologize for that.
I try to be a techie, but I'm really bad at it. But the things that I know about is that first, people are trying to say that these Mimblewimble implementations wouldn't be able to do a script language, which would, they would not be able to do atomic swaps or Lightning Network or whatever. But then there was created this kind of a script language, which now enables this on Mimblewimble protocols too. How it actually done, I have no idea. But one of the big negative sides on the Mimblewimble protocol has been already, fixed.
Okay, very nice. You're right. The scriptless script came after. But yeah, very good call to implement now also more quote unquote complex smart contracts, although they are quite dumb, can now also be implemented with the classical Bitcoin script that is now available on, or might be available with Mimblewimble here when a scriptless script is working and everything. But especially talking about the cut-through rate for the blockchain, that is specifically working with key aggregation. So basically, it means that in Bitcoin you have a block that contains all the individual transactions, right? And as soon as you spend a coin, you spend this previously UTXO in the input and dedicate this specific coin to a new script, right? To a new input. Sorry, to a new output. Right? So you spend the input and send to the output, so to say. And then once you have spent the output, it is no longer in the UTXO set, so it is no longer available for spending, but it is still in the chain of digital signatures that lead up or that start at the Coinbase transaction where the new Bitcoin are being created to the most current UTXO set. And what Mimblewimble allows you to do is that it gives you the it allows you to delete all the or not even you don't even need to save all these historic datas, because you can spend a coin directly to a new address, and the proof of having this new address is a key in and of itself, that is enough to prove that this specific coin is part of the UTXO set or of the most recent set.
Interesting. I mean, like what I've understand is that usually on Bitcoin blockchain, it's like, recorded that A pays to B, B pays to C, C pays to D. But in Mimblewimble blockchain, I guess it would be like just that A would pay to D, but there it has been a part. I mean, B and C has been in this transaction, but nobody would know when and where and how would it have been. How would the path has been, walked or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, it just sort of relies on transaction kernels that can be used to verify between the sender and the giver that everything is right, and that's why the sending money or receiving is a multi-step process. But when it's broadcasted to the blockchain, there's no way to calculate things back. So it's like these kernels are basically large outputs that you don't have access to the factors to, and yeah, so the person who sends and the person who receives would communicate between themselves, but no one else can. Once you want to, if you open any sort of green block explorer or you just look at any, there's nothing there pretty much. It's just there's no way to get anything. So yeah, and so yeah, that's how the
Uh,
privacy and also I think the scalability ties into that as well. But I'm not sure how exactly.
is it true that the sender and receiver has to be online at the same time for the whole transaction?
Not
Or
really. Not really. All it is they have to be able to. They just need to be able to send each other the information that is necessary to complete the transaction. So, the example they say is if I initiate a transaction, I could give that data to the receiver on USB if I want. I can post it to him. Do you see what I'm saying? Like you don't actually have to be online at the same time, but there is a multi-step process that does have to be carried out online. But you don't have to both be online at the same time for this to happen. All that's necessary is that the file transfer or information transfer does take place, whether that's offline or online. It's not a big issue. So yeah.
Um, and yeah, very nice. And that is one of the key differences as well, right? Is that and this was how it was proposed to be in Bitcoin early, as well, to have several rounds of communication beforehand, and it is still implemented this way with multi-signatures, right? If you want to spend a multi-sig transaction, you generate the transaction, right, with the outputs, the inputs and the outputs, and then the first individual signs it, then the second key signs it, and then the third key signs it, and all these all the signing process and all the communication of this transaction data happens, quote unquote, off or happens off the blockchain. Could this communication could happen over the internet, could happen over Tor, could happen over satellite, could happen over pieces of paper passed along, right? This communication can be done in any form. But then once all signatures are aggregated or combined here on this transaction, both for Bitcoin multisig or for Mimblewimble Grin transactions, only then do you go online and broadcast it, and tell the entire network. But the aspect, or is this? But in Mimblewimble, it is that the receiver and the sender have to communicate, right? So.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, for example, as we see here on the right, here having the tally coin, a static QR code right here, that would not be enough in Mimblewimble in Grin, right? With this static QR code, where I do not communicate, right? I just give you the information of my public address. You could not send funds here directly to me. First, I would have to be, or we first have to communicate over several rounds, not just this one QR code.
That is interesting. I'm not even actually sure how does it work. I've been thinking about downloading the Green wallet maybe today or tomorrow just to find out.
Yes, Sal, can you maybe speak a bit about the user interface of actually, or user experience more of actually sending a payment?
Well, I mean, I'll talk about it briefly. I think Grin is effectively a lightweight implementation of Mimblewimble. So it's basically quite bare bones. I think right now there's a few wallets being developed, but it's effectively a command line wallet. Even miners and on our group, there's loads of people coming and criticizing Grin for not having all of this infrastructure there ready to use, but it's effectively just putting out a working blockchain at the moment. And there's a command line wallet. There's a few wallets being produced. So I think wallet 713. I think they're live. I haven't used it myself yet. That's being developed by one of the Grin developers as sort of an additional layer. And there's also, I think, Project Iron Belly or Lead Belly. I can't remember the name. That's also developed by one of the developers. And that's a wallet that will be used, iOS wallet and Android wallet, like a mobile wallet, basically. But yeah, it's really lightweight and it is a bit clunky if without these second layer solutions or these second layer infrastructures. But all of these are being developed, one by one, and they're sort of all private projects. As a blockchain and as a team, what the Grinders have put out is a lightweight blockchain that doesn't really have a lot of infrastructure around it. Even a lot of the like miners were developed independently by people that open source the code, of course, like Windows and Linux and all these other miners. They all came out they weren't necessarily all developed by Green devs. So yeah, and all of this you can find on the GitHub, so you can see a lot of the community projects that are looking to build more infrastructure around Green itself. So yeah, so if I'd say from a user interface, and it's a bit clunky. It's not an ICO, so it's not polished. The polishing is a community effort.
Yeah, and I think we shouldn't be expecting too much. I mean, wasn't Green launch 5 days ago or something like that? So maybe we should just hold our horses and see where it goes.
Yes, exactly. And there are several different steps that first have to happen. Right now, this is really bare bone because this is actual cutting edge cryptography and technology. You have to be careful with all that. And maybe even given quote unquote layman users that need a graphical user interface in these early days might not even be a smart choice here. Right? So having kind of this proof of skill with using the command line might be quite interesting in the first couple of days to make sure that actually everything is working properly before others invest serious money in that. So yeah, this is very much an experiment, right? And still very much a work in progress. And again, in the early days, Bitcoin was exactly the same. Right there was only the command line. There was not much else, and you had to communicate like that. These payments over IP addresses were several step communications beforehand, right? So we might see that in the near future, and especially in the long term future, massive changes to this technology and how the user interacts with it. But Sal, what is like your kind of vision on how a graphical wallet would look like? Would it be similar to Bitcoin, how we know it, and that it would be abstracted and you just see the balance and you just press spend? Would you have the same issue with coin selection as you would have in Bitcoin?
I really can't say. I do feel that due to the excitement of Grin and the sort of especially not just amongst sort of laymen, so to speak, but also sort of VCs and other financial firms, that all of this will show up at some point. Technically, I don't know how it can be implemented. I don't. You can't bystep the multi-stage process that's sort of built into the blockchain. But maybe some users would be willing to sacrifice privacy by having that included in a wallet server. So I think solutions will exist, and a lot of them will be obviously consumer focused. I think it's going to take time for that to happen. As an ecosystem, the whole project needs to develop. Um, but yeah, some of those solutions will compromise privacy, some of them might not. But this just goes down to sort of consumer choice. If you're willing to let go of some of the complications of sending transactions and also let go of privacy, you might go for a wallet that does that. If you want to maintain complete privacy, you might just stick to your own command line wallet or use a consumer wallet that does not compromise on privacy. all these things are to be determined and to be seen. But it's going to be very organic. It's very, very Bitcoin-esque. I don't think anyone can say right now where things are going to end up. The whole project could end up fading. Who knows? So it's just I have myself a wait and see approach, and I'm just doing what I can to support the community in the meantime. Really.
Really interesting. Sal, do you know what is the situation against or with ASICs on Grin? Are they, going to support it, or are they going to fight against it, or how is it going to work?
Yeah, I do. So from the events that I've been to, the devs approach is that you can't prevent ASICs completely. And so the approach they've taken sort of a middle of the road approach where for the first 2 years, GPUs will be favored to ASICs. And what they've done is they've released two algorithms for mining. 90% of the rewards initially are going to be allocated to the GPU friendly algorithm or ASIC resistant GPU friendly, and 10% will be allocated to an ASIC friendly algorithm. They're called Cockatoo and Cockaroo. I always get confused which one's which, but you can Google that. And then over 2 years, they're going to sort of slowly increase the rewards that are allocated to the ASIC friendly algorithm as a percentage of total rewards. And every 6 months, they will be changing the GPU ASIC resistant algorithm to prevent ASICs from developing to mine the GPU friendly algorithm. So they kind of want ASICs to only mine the ASIC algorithm and GPUs to be able to mine the GPU focused algorithm. And then at the end of the 2 years, it's essentially going to be an ASIC friendly blockchain. But the hope is that ASICs will be something that is, just, consumer available to the average consumer, not something that only highly specialized firms have a monopoly on. And this is sort of the philosophy and the approach that they've taken to ASICs. And I think it makes sense because, ASICs they're effectively necessary to secure the blockchain, in a more energy efficient way. So, yeah.
Well, I would actually say that that quote unquote fighting or ASICs and trying to be quote unquote ASIC resisted is both futile and economically just a bad decision, because first of all, ASICs are like chips that are specifically designed to do a task are always better than general chips. So, and you can do a specific chips for any computational problem. Right, so for any algorithm that you put out there, there can be potentially a ASIC. Right? So you would have to do something like Grin is doing with changing the hashing algorithm repeatedly. But that introduces a lot of uncertainty, right? So you don't. It's just you don't know what security you will have in the future, and this is extra cost that reduces the usability of this currency, of this money. And then further, it incentivizes entrepreneurs not to secure the chain. Right, this is some extra cost, some extra burden. So there will be probably less entrepreneurs providing the service of security to the users of this currency. So what you're basically doing is you're excluding entrepreneurs from making the blockchain more secure. And thus, of course, you are much more prone to 51% attacks than currencies that let specialization occur and that embrace the specialization of miners, not just into farms and mining pools, but also especially into with ASICs. So you can have more security for the same amount of electricity.
Max, I think you were talking about Monero, not Green. But yeah, I've been wondering why Monero is ASIC fighting against ASICs also. But I think it's they are not just against ASICs. They are just against that one company would be the only one who's selling these chips at the time, so they wouldn't have this kind of like monopoly on it. But I think they're gonna give up soon enough anyway.
So I agree, Rafe, but I thought that Grin has shifting algorithms as well.
Yeah, just to jump in and clarify, so that's only for 2 years. They're only going to try and maintain ASIC resistance for 2 years, as far as I'm aware. It's not a permanent thing. And the idea is to initially give GPU miners a chance at mining Grin, until consumer-friendly ASICs or consumer ASICs which are available to the average consumer do become more available. So it's not a permanent thing. They will be doing that every 6 months for 2 years. And then I think after that, they tone it down and there is no more ASIC resistance, as far as I'm aware. But I do need to double check those facts.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, my mistake. Yeah, and good that Sal, you brought up this two types of mining algorithms, because I've been wondering why the hell do we need Cockatoo 32 and Cockaroo 29, and what does this mean? But yeah, all right, two different algorithms.
Yeah, it's a hybrid approach. So don't hold me on this. I think Cockaroo is the GPU one, and Cockatoo is the ASIC one. And so initially, 90% of rewards are allocated to Cockaroo, 10% to Cockatoo, and then there's like sort of a sliding scale over time, and more rewards will be allocated to the ASIC friendly algorithm. And over 2 years, they will be changing the hash of the GPU algorithm to the hashing algorithm of the GPU algorithm to make sure that the GPU algorithm doesn't also get dominated by ASICs, and to give consumers a chance to mine Grin. But like I said, I think that's only for 2 years, and then after that, it's all they're embracing ASICs, not trying to resist them in any way. So I think it's a very good hybrid approach. It makes sense to me, and I totally agree. I don't think ASICs are something you can stop. Um, they make sense, you know.
Yeah, great points, and thanks for the clarification. And it is a really tricky problem, and Bitcoin solved it quite easily because in 2008 or 2009, nobody cared about Bitcoin. Nobody cared about cryptocurrencies. And so there was much less of a potential attack pool, or pool of potential attackers. And so, and Bitcoin grew emergently as the very first blockchain proof of work based currency. So there was only Bitcoin to do SHA-256, and you couldn't really have large amounts of reserves of huge ASIC chips. But now, 10 years later, we have like 1,001 shitcoins, right, that all have their own proof of work chain. And each of them might be highly susceptible to a 51% attack, because there are larger attackers available, right? If you have, for example, a SHA-256 proof of work chain, but you are much smaller than Bitcoin is, you have much less hashing power than Bitcoin, this currency. Then the Bitcoin miners, just like a small 1% of them, could break off, mine your small proof of work chain, and do a massive 51% attack. And then go back to Bitcoin and be the really smart part of this blockchain yet. And especially when you have graphic cards, right? So when you have mining that is based on graphic cards, a hashing-based algorithm, then there are many graphic cards that are mining, that are already active, huge mining farms, right? So the possibility of, in these days now, that a attacker might attack your, or 51% attack your chain, are much higher. So it's quite tricky to mitigate this.
Yeah, and one thing that I was meant to ask Sal is that, related to this, is do you know how the difficulty adjustment would work in Grin? I didn't just understand it.
Not sure, to be honest. I didn't actually look into it that much, so I don't really have an answer. Just so everyone knows, I'm not a dev or anything. I'm just a community member. Like, I just think I should put that out there so people don't get the wrong impression. But yeah, I haven't looked into that myself, so I can't say.
Okay, so let's say that is just magic, like a Harry Potter thing should be.
Yeah. It's another spell.
Are the pull requests labeled spells or something?
I don't think so. No, I think they're normal. Yeah, there's too many of them to have a spell for each one, So
yeah, and didn't Mimblewimble just mean some kind of being not able to speak kind of spell that you would use in Harry Potter systems or whatever?
Yeah, it's some sort of spell. I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan, so I can't tell you which spell it is. But also Ignotus Peveril, he was the guy who launched Grin as an implementation. He's the one who announced the project. He's also anonymous. No one knows who he is. That anonymous pseudonym is from Harry Potter too. So the whole Harry Potter theme is quite present.
Magical stuff.
Yes.
It's a magical blockchain, so yeah.
It is, right? So it's quite compelling and rather complex. And of course, we all don't know too much about this, as no one does. Like we're all not experts here, not at all.
And one thing that I had to just say it out loud, was that wasn't Green made with language Rust, and Beam would be with just C++. Am I correct?
Grin is Rust. Beam, I haven't looked into it, to be honest. So I can't talk for them. But Grin is Rust, so yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
tough not to crack.
Yeah, just little things that I know about Beam is that they have a limited supply. I think it's 262 million coins, and they would have this halving type of a thing. They would start with first issuing 100 coins every minute, I guess, and after 1 year it will be halving to just 50 beams per minute. And after that, after 4 years, it will be halving again. So they have a little bit of different approach, and the hashing algorithm, I think it's GUI hash. And yeah, they've been doing the project with C++, I guess.
Yeah, that's as far as I'm aware, that's all correct. They're basically like almost Zcash like implementation of Mimblewimble. Not technology wise, just in terms of there's a 20% founders reward. That founders reward is released over 5 years, and yeah, they have limited supply. It's a much more profit oriented project than Grin, and to be fair to them, they don't try to deny that. They're kind of cool guys. I've kind of spoken to a few of them, so I think they've donated to the Grin Dev Fund as well. So yeah, they're kind of cool guys, but when it comes to Mimblewimble, I'm solidly behind Grin. I feel that it's a much more fair and uh, more in line with cryptocurrency philosophy implementation.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Sal. I mean, like I've been talking to these Beam guys also, and they are really great. I mean, like really helpful people, and they try to give you information about both the chains, not just one, or not just trying to sell out their own project or whatever. Yeah, I really like the people over there. And everybody does their stuff in their own way. If I understand correctly, they have a pretty much more of a company behind the project. So there is this a treasury system where all the blocks that have been mined and all of the Beam coins that have been mined, 20% would go to a treasury for the first 5 years, and from the treasury they would be splitting the beams like 20% would go to a Beam Foundation, and 35 would go to the VC investors that bought in early, and 45% would go to, I think, Beam core team for developers. So they just have a different kind of approach.
And although these funding mechanisms that the quote unquote core team gets the funding directly out of the blockchain issuance rate is quite interesting and definitely a novel approach, but I don't think that it is that good, mainly because this money isn't free. It's purchasing power that is being taken from those that hold the currency, right? Additional money is being created. This means purchasing power shifts from the hodlers to those that produce the money, or to whom that money eventually goes to. So that is, of course, this foundation setup thing. And then further, how does the foundation know what to do with that money? Like, why are they qualified to spend the money or the purchasing power from others and invest that in something that is quote unquote effective? So we have here the same issue as with socialist countries or with large companies. It's that we do not have private property, and therefore there cannot be a value judgment on what to do with these resources. And thus, these inflation subsidies programs, like we see in Dash or Zcash or now Beam as well, might lead to over consumption. So all of a sudden the developers are out on a yacht partying, right? And malinvestments. So they build something that is not really useful and that nobody likes, but they don't know that because they don't really have investors that actively give them the currency and would have some form of oversight.
Yeah, interesting point. I mean, I don't really like to say, the idea that actual money would have, the possibility to go on and buy in early or something like that. Money should be just a thing that is created without no third party, no one's, giving it out or something like that. Nobody's getting the profit from it. And even though I agree that this is a really good way to start the project like Beam really quickly and get everybody paid and all of that. I would just say that 5 years is a pretty long time. I mean, I would have hoped they would given just 1 year of this kind of a treasury model or something like that. 5 years is pretty long.
Just adding to those points, my personal feel is that Beam sort of shot themselves in the foot with this, although there's no other way to really do it if you do want to be a profit-oriented, cryptocurrency. But people naturally don't want someone to have an unfair advantage or a arbitrary position that someone else doesn't have when it comes to currency and money. And obviously, pre-national currencies and pre-modern economies, people gravitated towards resources that would be used as currencies, gold and silver, that can't be easily reproduced, and that can only be obtained fairly and through investment and hard work. So I do feel this whole founders reward approach is like you were saying earlier is what puts you above everyone else to get such a massive amount of the money supply. And I personally feel like the people who made the project or who funded it, obviously they do deserve to be rewarded, but it's really hard to balance that with the principles of a currency or a medium of exchange. And so I think the whole founders reward approach isn't the best solution to that. I don't know what is, but I do think this is part of why Beam, although they've marketed, obviously because their currency, they have much stronger marketing than Grin, they've sort of not really gained as much attention and as much sort of hype.
Yeah, I mean, they should have looked what people are saying about Zcash. Nobody likes that 20% treasury stuff.
Exactly, right. And although, of course, everything voluntary, right, everything peaceful, nothing wrong here. But we have to look here in the nuances, especially because we are in a hyper-competitive currency market, right? We have open source money. This means this is like the most radical free market that we're going to get. And this means that a new currency, such as Beam or even Grin, have to compete with the existing currencies. And that is, of course, Bitcoin. And then the question is, like, yes, this founders reward might work perfectly fine in a non-adversarial environment, right? Where everyone is jolly and happy. Yes, yay, great, everything works. But what happens under hyper-adversarial conditions? Let alone a state-level attack. Even what if the developers start, don't liking each other and they want to take the project in different directions? What happens then? Like that, these are the really tricky questions. And in Bitcoin, again, we have only 10 years of experience, but at least it's more than nothing. And we know that even under very adversarial conditions, I mean, look at all the horrible attempted forks and all the sanctions and banning and whatnot. The honey badgers still don't care. Right? So let's see how these founder rewards really work out under the most scrutiny, and if it still is a value or a useful currency at these times.
Yeah, and one thing that I've been wondering is that is actual developers of Beam not afraid of if they are making a privacy currency? I mean, are they not afraid of getting sanctions afterwards when people are using the currency to do bad stuff? I mean, Zcash doesn't have this problem; nobody uses it. But with Beam, if it really gets some traction, wouldn't these governments and everybody just blame the devs for making this possible?
That's actually a really good point, and I do think that's a big part of why the Green Council, that's sort of the group of developers that are making Grin. They haven't incorporated anything. They haven't, there's no one to attack. There's no one to sanction. There's no one to punish. It's very Bitcoin-esque in that it's just there. If people are going to use it, they're going to use it. You can only punish individual users if your government trying to crack down on this. You can only punish the actual people that are using it. There's no one to there's no unified point of failure for the system almost. And I think it's really, really good that they've done that and they've taken that approach.
Yeah, and that's cool. I mean, this kind of a tinfoil theory that I was going through in my head is that if I would be developing actual green, but I would need some kind of funding, I would need to get my salary or whatever. I would just, it would be wise for me to create a company that would try to do a similar kind of a project. So I could go on and get salary from this, for example, Beam project for developing stuff, which is actually for both projects, for Mimblewimble in general, for Green and Beam. So this Beam stuff would just, act as a way for us to get salary and develop the protocol that we actually like.
And then that then also ties into the aspect of motivation, right? Why are you in this? Why are you doing this? And if you're doing this because you make money, well, there's nothing inherently wrong about it. But this also means that when someone is going to pay you more money, you're going to leave the project, right? And we see that over and over, like especially with Ethereum and all these ICOs going on, right? If money dries up, they just move along. And then on the other hand, you have, as we might see it here in Bitcoin especially, the working on this because you want to. You are actually motivated because this is a compelling problem to solve, and because there are the brightest minds of your niche are working on this. So these intrinsic motivations, other than money, would I argue are much more important for a healthy and long-lasting and anti-fragile developer ecosystem.
Yeah, I do agree with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Too. I was just about to say I agree as well. And yeah, so I think Grin's council's approach is really intriguing. And so far it's worked. I mean, obviously working off donations is difficult, but so far things have worked out. But yeah, in terms of developer motivations, I can't speak for that. I have no idea. But based on what I've seen so far, I just think it's a passion for the technology, really, more than anything else. But yeah, like I said, I'm not the authority on that at all. So
yeah, now that you mentioned funding, I just have to shill a little bit. I'm not really sure what was the name of the site, but I also bought myself a little green hat. Just a sec. Maybe I can show it. Here we go. Maybe you can see it. Maybe you can't. But yeah, Sal probably knows the site where you can go on and support the project by buying some awesome merch from them.
yeah, it's called TM Gox, so it's a play on MT Gox. It was made by a community member, and I don't know him in real life. He's anonymous, but all of 100% of the profits do go to the Green Council. So if you don't just want to donate out of the goodwill of your heart, then that's another way to support the project. By buying some merchandise. If I'm allowed to do a quick show here, what I'll say is we at Green Hub, which is the sort of community resource hub that we're making, we're trying to find ways to produce sort of like revenue streams that can go straight to like the dev fund and community growth. But we haven't actually really, implemented anything yet. But yeah, regardless, try to donate, whether you benefit from that donation or not.
Yes, that is awesome. And we see here the Magic Gathering Online Exchange. Isn't that a cool play on words? Where you can actually get Make Alice Grin Again. That's a nice one. So a bunch of really cool shirts and stickers and whatnot. That's always nice. But I see here, it says the fiat amount, but I hope you only take, or the seller here only takes Bitcoin, and especially Lightning. Do you know so?
I haven't bought from them before. So I no idea. I think so though. It'd be weird if you're supporting a privacy currency by taking people's credit card details. So,
Yeah, I
so
don't
yeah,
think.
I
I think I at least paid with Bitcoin. I'm not sure if I paid with Lightning or not.
Oh, they're behind. They're not so reckless, but at least only altcoins. That's great. And I like here the discount, as we see here with 33%, 25 for Bitcoin, 20 for Ether, and it's really cool that this is a great display here on how entrepreneurs handle different currencies. Right? They give the greatest discount to that, or the cheapest price to that currency which they value most. Just from a praxeological point of view, what we see right here is a hierarchical ranking of the currencies and the valuation, the individual preference scale for the sellers here, for the entrepreneurs here. So they like Monero most, Bitcoin second, Ether next, Decred, and so on. And because the entrepreneurs here are valuing these currencies in exactly that step, they give the discounts. So that's a phenomenal real life example of praxeology and how this works.
Yeah,
And so go ahead.
no, I was just saying that. Yeah, I remember liking that style of pricing stuff. Also, I mean, really great.
Yep. And here we also have the GrinHub website. So just that chilling. Sal, what do you do here at GrinHub?
Well, yeah. It's just it's really just a community resource hub. So that's pretty much what it is. You can see by the OTC, we're trying to.
No, I think we lost you just, Sal. No,
Yeah, the
anymore.
microphone not working.
oh.
No.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just give me a second.
Okay.
How's now? Is that working?
Yes.
Okay, so I was just saying, Green Hub's it's just a community resource hub. Like I said, there is a sell buy sell OTC. We haven't actually made it live, so you can register interest, but there's no actual trades. But yeah, it's mainly just a resource hub, and like I said, this OTC and some of the other stuff we're planning is we're trying to create revenue streams to support the Green Deaf Fund. So like we would be donating the profits to the Deaf Fund, and also to because Green is very open source. The devs don't actually do any marketing, so we were thinking if we can create revenue streams, these can go into like helping people set up meetups, creating resources for people, creating some sort of videos, articles. So this is our thinking, and there's just loads of articles and stuff. The website's a bit bare bones because we're just three guys. Like we're not, like I said, we're not funded by anyone. We're not even devs. We're not even techies. So, but yeah, I like it. I think a lot of people like that sort of simple display.
It's called a no bullshit design.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I actually like. I mean, even if we could pay someone to redesign it, I would stick to the ethos, like the current design ethos. So, I like it quite a bit.
Yeah, I kind of like that simple style also.
Ah, perfect. Okay. And I think one other aspect that we've touched on briefly, but maybe we can elaborate a bit, is that the developers, all of them, as far as I know, are anonymous. So we do not know the real meat space identity of all these peers working on that. Sal, what has been your experience here being in this most semi-pseudonymous currency?
Just to clarify, some of them are anonymous, some of them aren't. So I've actually met a few of them, and I know their sort of real names and stuff, but they've made themselves known. And some are anonymous. I just think it all, like the whole community feel, the anonymity, the way it started, it all contributes to like the general, quote unquote hype around the project, and the feeling that this is really a no bullshit, no scam, no money grab project that is just trying to do something cool. It might work, it might not, no one knows. But yeah, and that's really what drew me in. Like I said, I'm not a huge techie. I don't 100% understand why Grin's privacy is better than Monero's, for example. I have some understanding, but not like to the detailed level. But one of the biggest thing that attracted me was the fair launch, anonymous developers. So there's no sort of unified point of attack or way to bring down the system. It's really cool, and like the other great thing about it is it's totally like decentralized. You know, if you want to do something for Grin, go out and do it. So just a bit more on Grin Hub's background. We kind of fell into it by accident. No one gave us this responsibility to set up a resource hub and to have the sort of biggest community around Grin. And yeah, even with meetups and stuff, you know, people are launching Grin cons all over the world. None of these are officially sanctioned by anybody. There's no one to sanction them. It's all really cool. And yeah, I'd just say, just a shout out to everyone who's watching. If you want to get involved, just jump in and do something, you know?
Yes, that's very nice. That's the ethos that these projects should have. That it is, of course, open source, and that it is, of course, a community and voluntary based. Right, and no one is telling these developers what to program, or no one is telling you to put up the site. Right, this is all based off for scratching your own itch. Right, you want something, well, go and build it, and then sooner or later, hopefully, people will value it, and then you will have well, done something nice. But no real hierarchical drop down pointing of what to do, because again, nobody really knows what to do. Like, we're all just here stabbing in the dark until we find something that makes some or more or less sense. So Rafe, do you have any else to say here about the community organization?
No, actually not really. I mean, we covered pretty well everything that I can think of right now. And you know, I just want to say that it's really great that people are trying to experiment with these different kind of protocol and different kind of systems. And well, Green and Beam and this Mimblewimble stuff is actually something that finally catches my interest in the altcoin space or whatever. And just keep on building. I keep on learning.
Yeah, exactly, right. That's a good thing. It's never going to be boring here in the rabbit hole. It always leads to some new niche, and it's always more to learn. So Sal, we covered quite a lot, but is there anything else that you would like to bring up that you think is important?
Not in particular. I kind of have to jump off now, so I just wanted to say thanks for hosting me. Thanks for doing this live stream on Grin. It's always nice to see people, you know, organically marketing or creating information about the project. So yeah, great stuff, guys, and it's been a pleasure being here. Am I okay to leave now, or?
Yes, I was just about to finish it up then. But
okay, if you're finishing up, I'll stay. That's fine.
Okay, perfect. Well, Sal, thank you very much here for taking your time and coming on the show. It's always helpful to talk about this and to share our conversations with others, so that this information is out there, right? And we need more information, more high quality information. And it's always good to advance the knowledge base. So thank you very much. Thank you also, Sal, Rafe, for coming on and helping here. And your research in Mimblewimble is also quite advanced, so that is nice. And hopefully we can continue this discussion about a currency or alternative currency to Bitcoin that actually might be of interest, right? That is not a scam like 99.9% of all the others are. So this is definitely something I would believe worth accumulating information and trying to understand it, and then making your own picture of it. So we talked about, again, quite a bit. First of all, of course, here the white paper that was released, and then the GitHub repository of Mimblewimble and Grin is, of course, also online. We talked, quick thing, we didn't talk about it, but I pulled it up. The market price was kind of rash. Here dropped quite a bit, but well, who cares about price? We have here the Magic Gathering online exchange, where you can get some really nice gear here and some nice merch. They do accept different currencies, and I love the scale here. And the Bitcoin 25% off is cool. They should accept Lightning as well. That would be fantastic. A lot of information is here in the Grin Hub that Sal is kind enough to co-organize here. That is fantastic. So check this out. And also Mimblewimble.cash. There's a bunch of other information here. And I would just like to point out that on Bisq, the decentralized exchange, since the most recent update here to version 0.9.3, there are actually now the two Mimblewimble implementations, Beam and Grin, available on the for trading on Bisq. So if you find a peer who is willing to sell you a couple Grin, then do that on Bisq. That's fantastic. And as you all know, this is a community-funded YouTube channel. So if you like the World Crypto Network, if you think that what we're doing here is worth a couple Satoshis to you, throw a couple shekels here to the tally coin. And Piers, it was a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed our little chat here, and I learned a lot. And let's continue the rabbit hole here on the next show. So Piers, thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you very much, guys.